questions like, did you touch their private parts? How often did you touch their private parts? Oh God. Were they satisfied? Oh. Were they satisfied in you touching their private parts? Oh my goodness. Hey, good morning, afternoon, good evening. I hope you are doing well. It's Nigerian XCW Speaks here, otherwise known as Chigo. Welcome back. The last video did really well, so thank you very much everyone who shared, commented, and all of the subscriptions that came off that as well. So thank you so much, and that's really good to see. So hope you've had a good week. Today, jumping straight in and try and talk less at the start, I wanted to share my thoughts on the recent documentary by ABC Australia. They released a documentary. It's on YouTube. I am going to link it in the comments below. It's about 47 minutes or so long. They uploaded it about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, almost 2 weeks ago now. Bear with me. I'm not going to show any clips from it just in case there's like copyright thing. So I'm just going to go through my thoughts on it. It reminds me very much when I reviewed another documentary. I think this was 2 years ago or so that did really well on the channel. I mean, just really getting the message out there of who these people actually are. So hopefully my phone holds up. I'm back on my phone today as we get through this. So I've made notes, lots of notes. My trusty little notebook is out. I'm trying to put them in some sort of order just so it makes sense. In the documentary, so it was called Four Corners. Some familiar faces in there, like Zulkim was on there. And they had quite a lot of solicitors that are currently working through cases to do with the witnesses. And if you don't know who Zulkim is, this is a lawyer in the US that is currently in a lawsuit. He's trying to get, for the very first time, members of the governing body to actually come and testify in court. Wouldn't that be something? So that is still in the works. We're yet to see what actually comes of that. But that is Zulkim. He is representing quite a few former Jehovah's Witnesses. We had another lady in the documentary, which her firm currently is representing 10 former witnesses. So we have some of that there. We had quite a number of elders, former witnesses, things like that in this documentary. So the first thing that stuck out to me, just starting from the very beginning, is the fact that there was a content warning at the start of it. That's like a foreshadow of what's to come. I feel like a lot of JW propaganda, a lot of the content that they put out, especially in video format, should have a content warning that this is not appropriate for kids. It is not appropriate for anyone who has any sort of sensitivities to things to do with CSA. And actually, let me say that as well. This is a warning. If you are someone that is affected by reports about CSA abuse, anything like that, take care of yourself as you watch this, as you listen to this. So the content warning, that was sort of the first thing that stood out to me. References to them being called a fear bubble. I thought that was very apt, very appropriate as a name, that the members live in this bubble of fear. Interesting as well to hear them being called a dangerous group. And if you've left, you'll know what that means. So it starts out with a bit of background. I thought it did a really good job of giving an overview of the group without getting too caught up in the details about the doctrines and stuff like that. I thought it did a very good job of giving an overview. Something else that I thought it did really well was really emphasize the power that the governing body has. It really did emphasize that these men really were the ones calling the shots, the people that had the final say, that their words were to be treated as if it was from God, whether or not it made sense. So I thought they did a really good job of hammering that home, because when you're hearing that and you looking at this picture of these 8 men, you realize the ridiculousness of it all. So I thought they did a really good job of highlighting that. So yeah, I think that's an overview of some of the things that I want to talk about that I thought they did a really good job of. So the first thing was a recap, well, at least that's what I've got, of the Australian Royal Commission from back in 2015, I think that was, and I spoke about that. Lots of people spoke about that as well at the time. Up until now, I didn't really know how many victims there were. We knew the number of perpetrators that there were, that it was just over 1,000. But I didn't know up until when I watched this today how many victims there were. So it was over 1,800 victims in total. That is of CSA. This is in Australia only. in just the last 60 years. So put that in context. Later on, we'll hear about someone who's in the US and his mind was just like, if this is what was in Australia, there aren't that many witnesses in Australia. Actually, let me look that up right now. Number of witnesses in Australia. Witnesses in Australia. If I can edit this out a little bit, I will do so. If not, I will leave that in as well, just for some context. So the number of Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, as at right now, it says it's about, is it 20, wait a minute, about 70,000? Is that correct? Am I reading this right? Like just under 70,000, the number of witnesses in Australia. And out of that 70,000, you have in the last 60 years, and this is the cases that were documented. These are the files that were kept. We have over 1,000 perpetrators, over 1,800 victims. And of course, the mind-blowing thing about the whole thing is that not a single one of these was actually reported. So if this is the first time you're hearing about that, look into it. Australian Royal Commission, they did quite a good job of really exposing things, really shining the light on some of these practices, and really showing the elders and the leadership for what they were. You know, people who just, the concept of having a duty of care, responsibility, a responsibility to look out for the welfare of children, it just seemed to go over their head, and it's something that comes up over and over again. So I found out this time what the numbers were. And they briefly spoke about just in terms of money, and this is going to be relevant. I might as well touch on it now. Some numbers about the fact that recently, when they sold off the headquarters that was in New York and moved over to the new place that they're in now, that the sales for that, they got over $1 billion from that, estimated. And then looking at just in Australia alone, just last year, they took in an income of $32 million. Now, those numbers are relevant because these people, when they were asked to join the Australian Redress Scheme, this was a government scheme that I think over 30 organizations that were part of the Royal Commission, that they'd been asked to join this scheme. It's sort of a way to create a pot of money. So people that had been impacted by CSA within these groups, they had a way to access support, to access help. The witnesses refused. They dillied and dallied, they delayed, they screaming that it's not on them. And you know what changed their mind? Where they finally signed up to it? When their tax exempt status was threatened. When there was a real risk that there was going to be some impact on their pocket, and that's when they joined. So there's a news article that I looked at just before this, that they finally signed up to it. And I think I did a video about this as well. I'll see if I can link that here. I hope I can remember to link these things. But that's when they joined. That is the sort of people that we're dealing with. People who, it's all about the bottom line. It's all about the money. So I thought that was something interesting they highlighted. 2018, they commissioned a report to claim persecution. It's like standard. This is what they do all the time. Persecution. That the ARC, Australian Royal Commission, had an inherent unfairness towards them, and that they cannot be responsible for what happens in witness families. Now, fortunately, the government wasn't buying this thing about having no responsibility. As Owen Zulkim says, they try to explain that because they don't have specialized child provisions like, daycare, catechisms, things like that, that they don't feel like they should have responsibility for that. But we're talking about a group that micromanages the lives of its members every single day in every single aspect, who they talk to, what they can do, what sort of jobs they can do, every single thing. So you cannot turn around and say, no, actually, it stops here. So the government wasn't buying that. The recommendations that they gave them, and as I was listening to these recommendations, I just laughed, because the group that I was born into, I don't really see them listening, but these are the recommendations. To involve women in judicial committees. That's not going to happen. As we know, judicial committees are headed by men, elders. So, that was the first one. The second recommendation was to abandon the 2-witness rule policy in cases of CSA. I mean, that is reasonable. That is logical. Knowing that the monsters who perpetrate this stuff, they're not going to be doing it when there's a witness. That is the nature of the crime. It's done in private. So lay aside the two witness rule in cases like this. But of course, Gary Bro, in his famous talk, we will never abandon this. They will never change their position on the two witness rule. And the third recommendation was to stop the shunning policy for victims of CSA. So if someone has decided to leave or, or been disfellowshipped because of them being the victims of CSA, they should not be shunned. Again, I don't really see this group doing that, but all sound like pretty reasonable recommendations to me. So that was the piece about the Australian Royal Commission side of things. And then in 2019, which was the last piece that I was going to talk about on that, they wrote a letter to the elders in Australia. You know how they like to play with words, you know how they do semantic games, something basically referring to allegations as wild talk, and that wild talk of someone making an allegation when written down in detail, as in the elders taking notes, that later on when it's being read out of context, it could be misunderstood. And so don't retain them. Don't keep the notes. Once you've submitted a report, which, the policy is when it's reported, fill out a form, write it over, send it to the legal department, and they make the notes on their side. Once that's done, the elders should not be keeping what they have. There was a solicitor that came on straight after that who was saying that actually in some cases that could be breaking the law, because those are critical documents, critical pieces of evidence. When we're talking about CSA, those notes can be quite relevant. So do they know that they're potentially breaking the law? Do they care? Probably not. These are selfish people who all they care about is keeping their bottom line, keeping their real estate company, and looking the part. That's all they care about. Okay, enough about the ARC bit. Let's get into some of the people that were in the documentary, some of the people that they showed. A point that really made me chuckle a little bit and sort of think, because one of the lawyers, Alan Ross, I think his name was, where was saying, isn't it ironic that for a group who have been prophesying the end time, 1914, 1925, 1975, and any minute now, for a group that genuinely thinks the end is going to come soon, how they are actively building and maintaining long-term investment property portfolios. Like, that's a bit odd, isn't it? So I thought that was quite an astute observation, shall we say. It's just, when you think about this just a little bit, it all starts to fall apart. So that was Alan Ross. Around that point as well, it really did hit me how much imagery the Watchtower produces that is damaging for kids. Looking at it now from the outside, all the scenes of Armageddon, and they seem to be, in the last few years, getting to a lot of this military type stuff where they're showing the government coming for them with guns and the military. That's got to be scary. So I remember so many times watching that, just really reaffirming the choice that I made, that my child is not going to grow up in this. My son is 8 now, almost 9. He's 9 in January. Just reaffirming the decision that I made, because for me, that was part of the final straw to really look into it. And the more I looked into it, like, okay, this is what this did to me. I most certainly do not want my child growing up in this as well. So a lot of times just seeing that being affirmed, the imagery, it's really bad. It's really bad, which is why I said at the start, a lot of what they produce should come with content warning. It's not appropriate for kids, because even if you want to compare it with kids' entertainment, at least with stuff like that, we know it's fictional. Even when we know it's fictional, even when it's shown as fictional, there's still a question mark. Is it appropriate for kids to see that? But we're dealing with this sort of imagery that's not being shown as just a work of fiction. They're being told, no, actually, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen to you if you don't do as we say. That's destructive. That's damaging. So that was something that really hit me. There was someone called Adam Van Wildem. His story just breaks my heart. He only left in 2019, so just 2 years ago. I was born in, and I'm guessing 1969. That's what he showed for the total length. So he was in the group for 50 years. poor guy was gay the whole time, and he's always known. So I cannot imagine the torture it must have been to be in a group like that, that thinks you are deserving of death for being who you are. So that man, his story really touched me. And actually, I'm going to connect that to another lady that they showed later on, Brandy Schmidle. Apparently, she is the niece of Stephen Lett. Stephen Lett, member of the governing body. Brandy spoke about her brother who was gay, who it got found out and he was disfellowshipped. And so Brandy, along with the rest of her family, started shunning her brother, who was also called Stephen. So I don't know if he was named after Stephen Lett. But she shunned her brother, and then after 5 years, she privately decided to start talking with him again. Unfortunately, her brother Stephen took his own life last year, incredibly sad. And for his funeral, one of the notes he left was that there should be no mention of religion or the witnesses, because they were the source of all of this, just to paraphrase. And I mean, that's awful. I cannot bear to think how many times that happens. And Stephen Lett, apparently a few months later, after his nephew took his own life, gives a talk. And in that talk, he talks about a fictitious homosexual who, if he happens to be resurrected, will have to, well, clean up his act. Because even though he may have been told before that God accepted him the way he was, he's going to find out that actually he isn't. And so he's going to have to change his ways. And, you know, I'm not even in Brandy's family, but I can't imagine how hurtful it would be hearing stuff like that. You know, it just blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. It's almost like these people are not real. It's like, it's not even real people. It's like, you're not even talking to humans. Like, who does that? Where is the humanity? Where is the sensitivity? I don't know. It's like you have a brain transplant when you get in this group. So that's the portion about being gay, homosexual. As someone who is bisexual myself, which is something that I have, it's not something that I could talk about. It's not something that was open, that was out there. In a lot of ways, I've just taken it as, I'm very fortunate that it could go both ways, and I could try and pick what was the easiest option. I don't expect my family will ever watch this, but if they did, that would be the first to hear of it. You know, that is a whole other thing. The Nigerian culture on its own is, you know, has its own problems to do with that. In fact, you could be imprisoned for that. So with a combination of that being the law of the land, and that is rooted in religion, yes, it absolutely is, because unfortunately, yes, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of African countries like mine are so steeped in religion that they can't see the wood for the trees. You know, it's like a book says so, and so it must be. Where's your fellow feeling for a human being like you? What business of yours is it what two adults decide to do in the privacy of their home? Anyway, I'm gonna leave that there. That's for that bit. Then we're gonna move on to, there was an elder who they showed, Peter Gontos. He left back in 2009. He was an elder for 15 years. And Peter confirmed what probably a lot of us suspect, that a lot of the cases that the elders have to listen to, most of the time is to do with fornication, adultery, etc. Because it's the forbidden fruit thing, isn't it? It's like, I think I've done a video, Sex and the Watchtower, something like that. I'll see if I can link that somewhere. All these things I'm planning to link. It may not be quick, but it will get on there eventually. So you confirm that is most of what they hear. The rest of the other sins don't really make much of an entrance there. And I cringed so hard at this bit. Oh my gosh, I was cringing so much. I thought it was bad. He was running through some of the questions that these elders ask these people who show up before the judicial committees, and I'm going to make some of you cringe as well, because I can't be the only one who has to go through that. So prepare to feel your skin crawl. So questions like, did you touch their private parts? How often did you touch their private parts? Oh God. Were they satisfied? Oh, were they satisfied in you touching their private parts? Oh my goodness. That's, oh my gosh, sorry. Oh, these are grown men asking what is a lot of the time a much younger, likely woman, like the next person they showed on the screen, a lady called Renee Pickles, who was 21 when she went before a judicial committee. Poor Renee, traumatized by the experience. In fact, I think she said that a lot of her trauma was directly linked to going before that judicial committee. And yeah, I understand that. I can believe that. Fortunately, I never sort of properly went to one, but no, I can absolutely believe that. Renee was born in, it's quite a story of loss as well, of course, in addition to, the committee she had to go through. Renee, apparently quite a bright child in school, and at the age of 12 she was picked to be put through to early entry for not at the age of 12, I think year 12, put through for early entry into university. And her mom didn't even think twice about chucking it, as if, why would we go to university when we have the best education? Again, I've got a video on the views on higher education. I will see if I can link that. They will eventually get linked. But anyway, Renee was asked some of those awful, cringeworthy questions. So Renee said she was asked, did you kiss? Did you fondle? Did he have an ejaculation? Did his ejaculation touch your skin? Can you see my face? Yes, a 21-year-old young woman was asked that in a room by 3 grown men. She wasn't allowed to bring anybody in for moral support, because that's how it goes. Anyway, Renee wasn't considered sufficiently repentant or whatever, and she was disfellowshipped and shunned. Again, we've talked about this, the sinister nature of the shunning policy, when you brought people up in this group to be no part of the world, and this is all they know, and this is the entire social circle, and then you rip them all off in one day. Humans are not meant to live like that. It's torture. And it takes time. It takes a certain kind of drive and person to rebuild all over again. It's disgusting. It's awful. So that was Renee. And then there was another former elder, Kevin Dean, who only left last year. Woohoo, people are still leaving. Kevin Dean was an elder. They went over how in the elder manual, the rules are to call the branch and then wait for instructions. Recently, I think maybe last year or something like that, where there's a slight change in the policy in the Shepherd the Flock of God book, where apparently parents and victims have the right to report. They're not being told that they have to. They have the right to report if they want to. And Kevin was just a slight change of the word to just say you have the right to report. Report, duty of care, basic care and decency for young defenseless children. It's not too much to ask. Anyway, Kevin Dean, what was sort of the last straw for him? He was informed in the congregation, because he was an elder, of a case of CSA back in 2019. He did what he was supposed to do. He called the legal department. They asked him to fill out a form. And from what he could see, the form would help defend the organization from any form of litigation. And Kevin was a bit confused. Like, why would we need to defend ourselves, And then he realized that this was nothing to do with child protection. This was to do with protecting the Borg, essentially. A few weeks later, Kevin got a call from the branch, someone who asked him to destroy his notes. Because, and this is Kevin's opinion, that since they've made notes about their version of events, they didn't want to have potentially Kevin's notes that would conflict with what they had there. And that was sort of the last straw for him. And he left. And instead, he is now part of a group that is going to be testifying against them in the US. And Kevin now has a magnificent beard, I have to say. So amazing how much that has grown in 1 year, because I can imagine when he was in there, he didn't have that. So go Kevin, and hope your testimony and others that are there all go towards exposing this group for who they really are. Just in general with the court cases, I think one of the solicitors on there is that their general tactic when it comes to court cases seems to be to deny and then defend and then delay. And delay and delay and delay for right up until the last possible moment. And then when they realize it's not going to work, they settle out of court. And that is an exhausting process for survivors of CSA, who is taking a lot of the time, everything to even speak out. And then it drags on and on and on. It's like they're trying to wear you out, sort of thing, which is not very, I don't even want to say Christian-like, because what is that? It just goes against human decency. So just to finish with a lady called Amy Whitby and her mother, Teresa Clare. Amy was apparently abused when she was about 11. The perpetrator was someone who had been convicted the year before for doing that to an 8-year-old boy. And in her position and her mom's, there was no way the elders didn't know that. Yeah, they took the note of it and just carried on as if nothing happened. This person carried on giving talks. Amy, tortured out of her mind. Whenever this person was giving talks, she would go out and pace round and round, just boiling with anger. Her mother, who she told, who fortunately believed her and was on her side, because her mom had suffered bouts of depression before, which, why wouldn't you be being in a group like this? She was being gaslighted, essentially told is her mental illness. I can imagine someone like that being told they were mentally unstable. And so eventually she had enough, and she decided to sue the local congregation as well as the Australian branch. And after 2 years, Amy's case is finally going to go to court and see where that goes. Sadly, her siblings are shunning her. Her mother was saying how her little grandchild was saying that he's forgetting her, of course, because of not seeing her. These are some of the real consequences. I'm not going to dwell too much on this because this hits too close to home. So I'm not going to stay on it too long, but I have unfortunately had to deal with that as well. And then finally, Bill Han, who now has a Memorial Day to mourn the shunning by his 3 kids, who don't speak to him at this moment because of this group. So yeah, that was it. Just a whistle stop of some of the worst of this group, and nothing about the blood policy at this time, but they really did call out just an offshoot of the ARC and how it impacts life in the day-to-day, and really just pulling back that facade of witnesses being these lovely people that just show up on your door nicely dressed. No, they're dangerous. And I don't mean the individual members themselves, because in my opinion, a lot of them are victims as much as anything. It's the leadership. My criticism is always at the leadership and the people who know what BS this is and who understand what damage this is causing, but they're holding on to power, they're holding on to money, they're holding on to their real estate. Those are the people that my criticism is for. And however many court cases is going to take to make them accountable, responsible, and if we're really, really lucky, pull the whole thing apart, that would be fantastic. And I think there's a lot of that, a lot of us that are sort of hoping for that. So I'm going to leave this there and go get editing and try and put this together so I can upload it for you. Let me know your thoughts. Like I said, I'm going to put the link to the documentary itself below so you can go watch it if you want. And let me know your thoughts, anything that stands out to you, anything that I missed. But we need more and more of exposure like this. I think at the moment the views on that video, it's about 1.6 million. So we need more of that. It's only been up for about 2 weeks now. So more. We need more eyes on that thing. That's already more than the number of witnesses in Australia. That's something. Anyway, subscribe, like, comment, share, and I will speak to you on the next one. Take care.